Hey guys, welcome back to the Nazarene Nerd Podcast. I'm David, the Nazarene Nerd. So, this episode is definitely going to be late, or it's going to be uploaded today, the day I record on Monday, the 9th. I'm setting up some stuff in the studio, doing a couple of different things that make it a little more easy to record in here. I didn't want to, I wanted a minimalist, studio, but I'm realizing it's a lot easier just to record to a computer with, a high def camera, which it's an old computer. So obviously I'm only getting 1080p, if that, out of this camera, even though it's a 4K camera. But I want to do, make this more of an actual studio for when people come over and, kind of less clutter. I definitely got to clean up, but there's some stuff I got to do. But this episode, uh, it got brought about because me and my coworker who works directly beside me 95% of the time now routinely get into discussions about things of the Bible, and he said he's Catholic, which I'm like, that makes a lot of sense the way he talks. um and his girlfriend went to a Baptist school. And so we kind of get on some discussions of difference between Catholicism and Christianity, and sometimes differences in denominations. And this got brought up about the stories in the Bible that you don't really hear about. Obviously, we want to spread the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, but these shows like The Chosen, the movie Samson, the new movie that just came out, David. We hear the same stories over and over again, but there's some really cool stuff in there that obviously everything that God does is supernatural, but that kind of brings about the superhero aspect of things that had happened in the Bible. So I've got a few notes on at least three people I want to talk about today. Um, so first one that I want to bring up is Philip, who at the time was told to go. He was a prophet. He was told to go south to the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza, and he found an Ethiopian eunuch who was an important official. God told him to go over his cart, to the cart he was on, and so Philip started listening, and he heard this eunuch reading from the book of Isaiah, uh, and Philip was like, "Do you know what you're reading?" And the eunuch goes, "How can I unless someone explains this to me?" And Philip goes, "Well, I can explain it to you," which it was from Isaiah 53:7-8. Explains it to him, basically the good news of Jesus, and ultimately the eunuch gave over his life to Christ. And as they're riding along, he says, "Well, what's stopping me from being baptized?" And Philip's, "Well, nothing." And he says, "Well, there's a water right there." So Philip goes and he baptized this eunuch. Uh, and like the second the baptism is done, Philip just transports, gone, just vanishes from thin air and transports somewhere else. Now, this isn't like of Philip's own, superpowers of him just being like, you know what, I'm gonna be like Goku and from one spot to the next. This was God's divine intervention, uh, taking Philip from one spot to the next. And that takes place in Acts 8:39-40. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Philip, however, appeared at Azotus and traveled about preaching the gospel in all the towns until he reached Caesarea. Um, so that's the first one, which, a quick one that it's, we dream of like, superheroes and these superpowers, but a lot of this stuff isn't out of the realm of possibility. Superpowers did exist. Uh, and going back to why this kind of got brought up, my coworker, his favorite superhero is the Flash, the fastest man alive. And it got us thinking, like, the fastest human alive today we know of is Usain Bolt, who topped out at a speed of 27 27.38, I want to say. 27.8 miles per hour. So, and forgive me if you guys don't like AI, but I used Google Gemini to kind of give me some statistics on some of the stuff, like the logistics of how, these superpowers would relate to today, and how they are just, superhuman. So, this story of Elijah, who doesn't travel, at the speed of light or even as fast as Usain Bolt. This is following the confrontation with the prophets of Baal at the end of the drought. Elijah displayed God's power by outpacing a royal chariot. In 1 Kings 18:46, the power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, or in I think the King James is girding your loins, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. Now, to kind of put that into perspective, the distance from Mount Carmel, where Elijah was at the time, after just insulting Ahab and Baal, and lighting the sacrifice, God lighting the sacrifice on fire after Elijah had soaked it, and this is right after Elijah basically told the prophets of Baal, they're like, Baal, where are you, or whatever, and he's like, maybe he's pooping, and this is in the Bible. He said maybe he's relieving himself, or maybe he's pooping, and so some of the stats for how supernatural this is for Elijah to be outrunning a horse and chariot, a king's chariot. It's King Ahab, a king's chariot, from Mount Carmel to Jezreel. Depending on the starting point, it's about 17 to 25 miles. So this man outpaced a horse and chariot, we'll just say 20, 21 miles. Outpaced him for 20 miles. So the historical context, the route, he ran across the Jezreel Valley, also known as the Plain of Esdraelon. It's flat, but it's got a muddy quagmire. Very quickly into heavy rain. After heavy rains, he just prayed for, to end the drought. So the rains are coming down, which would have slowed Ahab's heavy iron-wheeled chariot down. But the horses, would have been, going faster than a person's light jog. So in the girding of the loins, it mentions he tucked his cloak in his belt. Men wore long tunics, so he would have taken his long tunic and tucked in his belt and just took off. He had to pull them up, tie them around their waist to free their legs, essentially turning a robe into shorts for maximum mobility. And Ahab was riding in the pinnacle of military technology, while Elijah was an elderly prophet on foot. So, in Jezreel was the location of Ahab's winter palace, and he, running ahead of the chariot, Elijah wasn't just showing off; he was acting as a royal herald, albeit a divinely powered one, leading the king home after the nation had officially returned to God, because Elijah had just slaughtered all of Baal's prophets. And so I asked Gemini how fast was Elijah running, and they said the estimated chariot speed in mud is about 10 to 12 miles per hour, which, you don't think is all that fast. I mean, you can go 10 miles per hour on a treadmill, and it's a very fast jog. Very, very fast. But you got to think that Elijah was running that 10-minute mile pace for 20 miles. So the average speed would have been 10 to 15 miles per hour, him jogging, and it was about 20 miles, 32 kilometers. It would have taken him an hour and a half to 2 hours. So he's running at 10 to 15 miles per hour for 2 hours straight. So to put it in perspective, let's say, compare it to a marathon. A modern elite marathoner runs at a pace about 12 to 13 miles per hour. However, they do this on paving roads, lightweight gear, and after months preparing. Elijah was running through a torrential rainstorm on a muddy, unpaved plain after a day of intense spiritual warfare and physical exhaustion. He didn't just keep up with Ahab's chariot, he arrived first. This suggests a burst of sustained speed that would rival or exceed Olympic distances sustained for nearly 2 hours. So he's running these speeds for 2 hours straight. If you have a treadmill at home, set that thing to 10 miles per hour while you're listening to this podcast or whatever, and try to do that for 2 hours straight. That is just inhuman. And it's God's divine, again, it's God's divine intervention coming upon Elijah, but this time it isn't God physically, snatching somebody and putting him somewhere else. This is Elijah showing, God's power through just sheer athleticism for an old guy. It's important to note that Elijah didn't stop at a finish line or form medal. He ran the equivalent of a half marathon at a world record speed just to stand at the city gate and wait for the man who had been trying to kill him for 3 years. That's crazy. And then after that, he reported that to Jezebel, Ahab's wife, who was a terrible woman. Right after that, she threatened him. So if you want to read more of that, that's in 1 Kings 18. 1 Kings 18. And the last one I want to talk about, and if you guys like this, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below who your favorite superhero is, and what your favorite supernatural story of the Bible is. If you guys enjoyed this episode so far, let me know, and I'll do more. I'll try to find some more superhuman experiences from the Bible. I know there's just plenty of supernatural, but something that's relates more to being a nerd and superhero-esque. And I'd say one of my top 2 favorites, for being like something superhuman, which everybody knows knows the main stories of this guy, but Samson, who was arguably the strongest human that ever existed. In Judges 16, 1-3, so Elijah was known for his speed and endurance in that situation, but Samson was a heavy lifter. In the specific event in Judges 16, 1-3, he finds himself trapped inside the enemy city of Gaza. The Philistines set an ambush at the city gates, planning to kill him at dawn. So instead of waiting for the morning, he gets up at midnight, he finds the gates locked and barred. He doesn't try to pick the lock or climb over the wall, he just rips the gate out of the ground. Just rips his gate and carries it. Ancient city gates weren't just wooden doors, they were massive defensive structures. The components: 2 doors, 2 side posts, and the heavy crossbar, usually made of iron or bronze, to prevent from being burned down during a siege. In scholars and engineers, the estimated weight of this gate is anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 pounds, up to 2.5 tons. So, and he didn't just drop the gates outside the wall. The text says he put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron, which is roughly 3,000 feet higher than the elevation of Gaza, and the distance, uphill trek of about 38 to 40 miles. That is just crazy. He carried 5,000 pounds, up to 5,000 pounds, on his shoulders for 40 miles. I mean, Samson was a complete monster when it comes to strength. And the bodybuilders we see today would have, they look like these big guys, big guts, because they're not, or I guess weightlifters, my bad. Bodybuilders, they cut, they look better, whatever. But weightlifters are worried about strength, upper body strength and muscles, picking stuff up. So they're, huge arms, huge chest, bigger gut, because they're not too worried about, thinning down. They're just worried about the muscle that's already there and just bulking it up. But I'm going to guess that Samson, who could outlift any of these guys, did not look like them. I'm sure he was your average height Jew who, which they're anywhere between like 5'4" and 5'8". They were very short then, but I'm sure he was massive. I'm sure he was really built, but obviously his strength came from his hair, taking the Nazarite vow. Um, and I'm sure he'd have been scary to come across after hearing some of the stories as these Philistines time and time again tried to kill him, and then he ends up being with Delilah, who bugs him and bugs him and bugs him about where does his strength come from, and he finally gives in and tells her his hair, which is funny that he tells her a couple different things, and every time the Philistines try to come and kill him, he just you know brushes them aside and just wipes them out, killing what 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. After uh, so my wife and I have just finished watching the John Wick films, and they're really good. And when someone tells you it's a movie about a guy who goes on a killing spree because someone killed his dog, that's exactly what the movie is. He goes on a killing spree because someone killed his dog. I mean, there's more context to that, but there's at some point in one of the movies where they put a bounty on John Wick. Knowing the story, and he's in this assassin type underground world where everybody knows who he is. In the first movie, once the young kid who kills his dog takes his car, apparently doesn't know who he is, but his dad does, and his dad's like, you've just royally screwed us. And the whole movie is John Wick getting revenge, and I like how the movies just kind of succinct with each other. That basically the next movie happens right after that one ends, and so on and so forth. And we're on John Wick 3. Haven't watched 4 yet. But anyway, the second movie, I think it is, he gets a bounty put on his head, and it goes up to like $14 million, which is a lot of money. But knowing the stories of that guy and his uh, tenacity to just off an entire room of people, $14 million is not worth your own life. I mean, some people think it is, but listening to what happens to these people, if I was kind of on that, other side of like, hey, I've got the chance, but I'm hearing where he's at, he's just slaughtering everybody. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm $14 million is not worth trying to kill a guy who has a 95% chance of killing me. So you think of these Philistines with Samson, even if him getting with Delilah, I believe, was after the donkey jawbone story. If I was these Philistines and they're like, you need to go kill this guy, I'd be like, no, we can't do that. He killed 1,000 people with just the jawbone of a donkey, and you think that he's going to tell this woman his secret to being, weak? Now, he eventually does, but I'd be like, no, he's just going to kill us. And he, slaughtered thousands of Philistines. So there's a lot of stuff, and my wife and I were talking. This is the kind of stuff that you want the interesting things in the Bible you want to learn about. You hear the same old sermons, the same old stories over and over again, but there's comedy, there's a lot of heroics, there's drama, there's sarcasm in the Bible. I mean, some of the scenes that depict Jesus talking, sometimes I think the way an actor is acting as Jesus and what he says, I'm wondering if add a different tone to that. And would it sound more like he's either joking or a little more sarcastic? He's not just an angry monotone dude the entire, like, he had a sense of humor. There was things he said, and maybe we'll get into that in another video. There's the funny mentions of what Jesus said in the Bible. Like, he's sometimes he just gets a little sarcastic with people, and especially with people like Peter, who are very brash. So, but I just thought it was a cool, topic to talk about today. Again, trying to keep my episodes short until we do interviews because obviously they're a little longer. But I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit of superheroes in the Bible. And if you like it, I'll try to find some more. Maybe we'll do a part two to this. But again, thanks for listening and watching. I just had another email from Professor Hudson today, asking about he's really interested in coming down to the studio. So, it's gonna be really exciting to have a college history, medieval history professor in here talking, and hopefully I'll have the shield done by then, and the rest of the stuff cleaned up. But again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys will like the video, subscribe, share it around, and don't forget to put on the full armor of God and stay blessed. I'll see you guys next week.